Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. I was 16 when it happened to me. We lived on the outskirts of Chinle, Arizona, not far from the canyon rim. My older brother Isaiah and I shared a room, bunk bed style. He was on top, I was on the bottom. We weren't rich, but we had enough. And even though we fought a lot, he always made me feel safer at night. Until that night, until I saw something that looked like Isaiah, but wasn't. It started after our dog, Buster, went missing. He was half healer, half wolfhound, mean as hell to strangers, but never left our side. One morning he just didn't come back from the yard. My dad said a coyote probably got him, but even at 16 I knew that wasn't right. The fence was intact. No blood, no struggle, just gone. A couple of nights later, I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of something walking in the hall. Not heavy like boots, barefoot. The kind of soft thud you only hear when someone is deliberately trying not to make noise. I figured it was Isaiah going to the bathroom, but then I realized he was still on the top bunk, breathing deep, asleep. I sat up, confused, listened. The footsteps stopped right outside our door, and then came the voice. "Isaiah, you up?" My brother stirred, rolled over, mumbled something. "Come out here, man, I need help." It was his voice. Exactly, perfectly, except it wasn't coming from inside the room. It was coming from outside our door. I started to shake. Isaiah sat up, slowly, like he was half asleep. "What?" he mumbled. The voice spoke again, this time lower. Opened the door. Isaiah swung his legs down. I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I whispered. "That's not you." He looked at me like I was crazy, but something about the way I said it must have hit him, because he didn't move. We both sat there, frozen in the dark. Then, something walked past the bottom of our door, its shadow visible through the thin crack under the frame. It didn't walk like a person. It moved like it had too many joints in the wrong places. I swear to you, it turned and looked right at the door, at us. And it grinned. We didn't see its face, but we felt the grin, like it was smiling with something other than a mouth. Then it whispered, "That's okay. I'll come back when you're alone." It didn't walk away. It just stopped being there. And suddenly, the night was quiet again, too. Quiet. No crickets, no wind, nothing, nothing. My mom burned sage the next morning when Isaiah finally told her. She was pale and silent for the rest of the day. Said something had been trying to trick us, trying to get in. We never saw it again after that, but every now and then, I'll be outside, alone, and hear Isaiah's voice behind me, even though I know he's not there. And Buster, we never found him, but sometimes at night, I still hear a faint scratching at the back door, and the low growl of a dog that isn't really a dog at all. The apartment was stale, filled with the scent of something between dust and musty linens. Not terrible, but not pleasant either. As soon as I stepped inside, I was hit by the quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears. It was unsettling, to say the least. The place was small, but cluttered, with remnants of a life that had been abandoned abruptly. Clothes were strewn across the floor, magazines and newspapers piled in corners, and dishes were still in the sink. I took a deep breath, letting the gravity of the situation settle in. This was someone's entire life, frozen in time, and it was my job to unravel it. I began by clearing the trash. Fast food wrappers, empty soda cans, and old mail made up the bulk of it. Every now and then, I'd come across something more personal. A photograph, a love letter, or a handwritten grocery list. I couldn't help but feel like I was intruding, peeling back layers of someone's existence. Yet I knew this was why the girl had hired me, to give her the space to grieve without the burden of these memories. As I moved to the bedroom, I found a small box under the bed. It was old, wooden, and locked. My curiosity got the best of me, and I searched for something to open it with. After some time, I found a small key in the top drawer of the nightstand. It fit perfectly into the lock, and with a soft click, the lid opened. Inside was a collection of letters, old and worn, some stained with what looked like tears. There were photos, too, of the girl and her mother, smiling and carefree, of her as a baby, and of a man I assumed was her father. But beneath all that was something I hadn't expected. A diary. It was small, with a leather cover, and the pages were filled with neat, looping handwriting. I shouldn't have read it. I knew that, but something compelled me to turn the first page. March 14th. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm losing myself. I see her in the mirror sometimes. Not me, but her, my mother. She used to stand in front of this very same mirror, brushing her hair, just like I do now. But when I look, it's her eyes staring back at me, not mine. Am I going crazy? I think I might be. I hear her too, at night. Just a whisper, but it's enough to keep me awake, enough to make me wonder if she's really gone. I paused, my heart beating a little faster. I shouldn't have been reading this. It wasn't mine to know, but I couldn't stop. I flipped to another entry, April 2nd. The dreams are getting worse. I see her standing at the foot of my bed, just staring. She doesn't say anything, but I know she wants something. What did I do wrong? Why is she haunting me? I haven't slept in days. I feel like I'm falling apart. Maybe I deserve this. Maybe I'm the reason she's stuck. Maybe I'm the reason she's still here. I quickly closed the diary and put it back in the box, my hands trembling slightly. The girl had never mentioned anything about her mother being like this, but, then again, why would she? I felt a deep pang of guilt for having invaded such a private part of her life, but now, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this job than just clearing out an apartment. It took a few hours, but eventually the apartment was starting to look well habitable again. The cat, now fed and slightly more relaxed, was following me closely, his curiosity piqued by every rustling bag and creaking cabinet. I found myself talking to him like he understood, maybe because I needed the distraction. "You're lucky I found you, buddy," I muttered while wiping down the kitchen counters. "I don't know how long you'd have lasted on your own," he meowed, either in agreement or because he wanted more food. Either way, it was comforting to have the company. When the kitchen and living room were mostly cleared of trash, I took a moment to breathe. My back ached, and the smell of the apartment still lingered in my nose, despite the mask. The cat had wandered back to the couch, curling up as if he'd claimed the spot. I'd have to come back another day to go through the sentimental items, the photographs, letters, and personal belongings that were scattered around. But for now, I had done enough. The apartment was starting to reveal a story, one that felt eerily familiar. I knew the girl, Amy, had a strained relationship with her mother. The way she had spoken about her, cold, detached, it was like she was talking about a stranger, not the woman who raised her. The desperate way she wanted nothing to do with the cat, as if it was some lingering remnant of a painful memory, unsettled me. What had happened in this apartment? What secrets did it hold that Amy wanted buried along with her mother's things? As I packed up for the day, I couldn't help but glance at the diary I had found earlier. It was still sitting in the small box beneath the bed, as if waiting for me to open it again. I didn't, though. Not yet. I had a feeling that once I started reading, I'd be dragged into something deeper than I'd expected. Before leaving, I scooped up the cat, who protested with a soft hiss before settling in my arms. "Don't worry, little guy. You're coming with me," I said softly. He didn't seem to mind too much. Maybe he knew that things were about to get better, or maybe he just knew he wouldn't be alone anymore. As I walked out of the apartment, locking the door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There were still too many unanswered questions. The cat curled up in the passenger seat of my car, and as I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets that apartment was hiding, and whether I was ready to uncover them. I sat there, for a moment, digesting the last note. The creature she mentioned, was it the cat? Lucky, now snuggled up in my apartment, blissfully unaware of the bizarre reverence with which this woman had regarded him. I shivered, not just from the strangeness of it all, but because the tone of these notes had taken a much darker turn. This woman had clearly descended into some deep, religious delusion. The codes, the symbols, the ciphers, all of it pointed to someone who was unraveling. And yet, there was a level of certainty in her words that made my skin crawl. She believed with every fiber of her being that she was serving a higher purpose. The idea that someone could live in this level of isolation, cut off from reality, while still functioning enough to maintain a facade of normalcy, well, it unsettled me. The radio crackled again, just as I reached for another note. This time, I jumped, half expecting it to start spitting out another cryptic message, but it remained silent. I glared at it, unnerved. That thing was going off way too often for coincidence. A low hum filled the room, barely noticeable, but just enough to raise the hairs on the back of my neck. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Maybe it was the tension of reading these unhinged ramblings. Maybe it was the faint smudges on the windows. Whatever it was, I felt it. The room felt colder, as if some invisible presence had entered and was now watching over my shoulder. I glanced over at the pile of notes, feeling hesitant to continue, but also knowing I had to push through. There was something in this room, something hidden in these papers, that I needed to uncover. I picked up the next note. The false prophets walk among us. It began abruptly, without the usual preamble of her devotion to God. This one felt different, almost as if she had been interrupted mid-thought. "I saw one today, walking by the house. I know they come to tempt me, to lure me away from the Lord's path, but I will not falter. They will burn with the rest of the unworthy when the time comes. I have His word, His protection. I must prepare for the final days, when the earth will be cleansed, and only the righteous will rise from the ashes." My heart raced as I read those words. This wasn't just about some religious obsession anymore. She truly believed the end was coming, and soon. The false prophets she mentioned, were they just passers-by? Neighbors? Or perhaps the kids I thought were messing with her? Another thought crossed my mind. One I didn't want to entertain, but couldn't shake. What if those agents of the devil were anyone who had tried to help her? Doctors, family members, maybe even Amy herself. It would explain why Amy had distanced herself so much. The coldness in her voice, her reluctance to even acknowledge her mother's life. It all made sense now. She must have witnessed the deterioration firsthand, powerless to stop it. I continued to sift through the remaining notes, each more frantic than the last. There were detailed instructions about preparing for the apocalypse, stockpiling food, reinforcing the house, and keeping out the unworthy. The handwriting became sloppier, less controlled, and the sentences fragmented, jumping from topic to topic with increasing paranoia. Then, as I reached the bottom of the pile, I found one last note. This one was different, crumpled, as if hastily written and discarded in a moment of clarity. "I fear I have been wrong." I paused, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it fully. "I have followed His word, but I hear something else now," it whispers. "When I try to pray, it tells me things I do not want to hear. Horrible things. It tells me that I am not worthy, that I have been abandoned, I know this is a test, but I am so afraid. Lord, please, do not leave me. I will serve you faithfully until the end, but please, do not leave me in the dark. There was no signature, no date, nothing to indicate when she had written it, but the desperation in her words was palpable. This was someone at the edge, hanging on by a thread, and it was clear that she had lost the battle. I folded the note and placed it gently back into the pile, my mind racing. The house felt different now, heavier, as if the weight of her delusions had imprinted themselves on the very walls. I needed to finish this job, but part of me wanted to leave and never return. The rational part of me knew that there were no ghosts here, no lingering spirits, but the emotional part, the part that had spent hours wading through this woman's deepest fears and madness, wasn't so sure. I gathered my things, casting one last glance at the radio. It was silent now, still. The air felt thick with the remnants of something unspoken, something unfinished. Lucky was curled up in the corner when I got home, oblivious to everything. As I scratched his head and sat down beside him, I couldn't help but wonder what it must have been like for him. Stuck in that apartment, alone with the madness of his owner, waiting for food that may never come. And yet, he had survived. I thought about the woman, her notes, and the apocalyptic visions she had spent her last days fixating on. Was there something? She knew that I didn't. Or was it all just the tragic descent of a mind lost to illness? I still don't have an answer. All I know is that some places, some people, leave marks on the world long after they're gone, and sometimes those marks are too deep to ever be fully erased. But for now, Lucky and I had each other, and maybe that was enough to keep the dark at bay. As I finished recounting the events surrounding Teresa's house and her obsessive delusions, I couldn't help but feel the weight of her story lingering. It had taken me a while to get it all down, probably because I hadn't revisited those memories in such depth for a long time. It's funny, well, not funny in the literal sense, but even though I've cleared countless homes since Teresa's, house still sticks with me. That radio, for one thing, has become almost a symbol of my work. I'll admit, I probably should have tossed it the day it nearly blew out my eardrums, but something told me to keep it, to honor Teresa's memory. A lot of people, if they had been in my shoes, would have thrown everything in the dumpster, or at least handed it off to Amy and washed their hands of it. But that's not what I do. I'm not sure what I expected when I kept the radio. Part of me thought it might help me make sense of everything. Her notes, her delusions, the strange circumstances surrounding her death. I figured maybe, just maybe, there'd be something more to discover if I kept it around. But the truth, every time it flickers to life, with that preacher's voice spouting about sin and damnation. Or worse, those soft, calming words from a woman I never knew. It just makes me wonder if Teresa's spirit, or something else, is still tied to it. I've had friends tell me that I should get rid of the whole collection, museum as I call it now, before something worse happens. But I can't, not out of fear, but because it feels like these items, these relics of people's lives, need to be remembered, even if no one else cares. I suppose it's a way for me to keep a piece of them alive, to give meaning to the chaos they left behind. And while the radio hasn't done anything as dramatic as that first screeching episode in a while, it's always there. That crackle, that subtle hum when everything else is quiet. It reminds me that I'm not just clearing out junk. I'm piecing together lives, unraveling stories that no one else may ever hear. So, that's the story of Teresa. It was my first big job, and one that marked the beginning of a strange path I've been walking ever since. If anyone's curious about more of the stories I've gathered, well, I've got plenty. From the seemingly mundane to the downright bizarre. There's no shortage of secrets buried in the clutter of people's lives. And hey, if the radio kicks on again tonight, with one of those fire and brimstone sermons, I might just listen. After all, I've learned that sometimes the strangest things have the most to teach us. I had to pause after reading that entry. It was one thing to go through Alan's journals from the early days, when he was struggling with delusions and hallucinations, following the deaths of his loved ones. Back then, his mind was fractured, fragile, and desperate for some kind of solace in the face of all that tragedy. But this was something else. Years of recovery, a family of his own, and now this resurgence of the black-eyed figures. What struck me most wasn't just the terror of seeing his daughters at the door, calling to him with those same voices, but how that encounter reopened something he had buried deep. I've read enough accounts of strange phenomena to know that this wasn't just a random nightmare. His description of the girls, their eyes, and the overwhelming fear that gripped him all pointed to something more. The rational side of me wanted to chalk it up to the stress of fatherhood, the pressures of life, or even some leftover trauma from his earlier years. But the way he wrote, the sheer panic in his words, it felt too real, too immediate to be brushed off as another delusion. Alan had spent over a decade rebuilding his life. His journal detailed how he overcame immense grief, guilt, and the hallucinations that had plagued him after his family's deaths. He'd found happiness again with his wife Rosie and their children. He'd built a stable life, far removed from the chaos of his youth. But now, all of that seemed to be in jeopardy. I couldn't help but feel for him. He must have been terrified, not just because of what he saw, but because of what it represented. If the black-eyed figures were real, then everything he'd worked so hard to believe, that his mind had been healed, that he wasn't crazy, was falling apart. And if they weren't real, then it meant the hallucinations were back, creeping into his life when he least expected it. The journal entries that followed this one were short, erratic. Alan wrote about sleepless nights, how he started keeping the house locked up tight after dark, and how every time he heard a knock on the door, his heart would race. There was no longer any mention of stargazing with his telescope or tucking his kids in at night. It was as if a cloud of dread had settled over his home, and he was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. The next entry that stood out was from a few weeks later. Dear Journal, it happened again last night. This time it wasn't just the girls. Rosie and I were watching TV when there was a knock at the door. It was late, maybe around 11. I didn't want to answer it, not after last time, but Rosie insisted. She said I was being paranoid, that it was probably just someone who needed help, maybe one of the neighbors. I didn't want to scare her, so I opened the door, praying it would just be a lost traveler or something. But no, there he was. It was the boy, the same one I'd seen all those years ago, the one I'd convinced myself was just a hallucination, a product of my trauma. He was standing there, staring up at me with those same black eyes. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, silent. Rosie was right behind me, and I felt her hand on my arm, probably wondering why I wasn't saying anything. And then he spoke. "Can I come in?" he asked, in that same eerie, emotionless voice I remembered from before. I slammed the door in his face without a second thought, locking it, bolting it, doing whatever I could to keep him out. Rosie was yelling at me, asking what the hell was going on, but I couldn't explain it. How do you tell someone that the figure from your deepest nightmares is standing on your front porch? I didn't sleep that night. Every little noise made me jump. I kept expecting to hear another knock, to see those black eyes staring through the windows. But the boy didn't come back. Not that night, anyway. Alan's writing became more fragmented after that. He stopped journaling about his family altogether and focused solely on the black-eyed figures. He was convinced they were targeting him, that they were somehow connected to the tragedies in his past. His entries were filled with paranoia, each one shorter and more erratic than the last. The final entry I read was almost illegible. Dear Journal, they won't stop. They keep knocking, asking to come in. I can't let them in. I won't. But they're getting louder. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep them out. That was the last thing Alan wrote. After that, there were no more entries, no more signs of his thoughts or feelings. The journal just ended. I wish I could say that I knew what happened to him after that. But the truth is, I don't. When I first got the box of his belongings, I wasn't told much about his fate. I've tried to find out more since then, but every lead I've followed has gone cold. It's as if Alan and his family just disappeared. Whether it was the black-eyed figures that got him, or if something else entirely happened, I may never know. All I know is that whatever those figures were, they had haunted him for decades, and in the end, they won. This was the turning point for Alan. His desperation was palpable as I read through those final entries. He'd been strong, or at least he had tried to be, for so long. The journal entries revealed a man who was doing everything he could to protect his family, even as he felt himself unraveling. But when the demons started directly interacting with his children, taking his son's hand, playing games with his daughters, Alan knew he was out of options. He had lost control over his home, his safe space, and worst of all, over himself. His perception of reality had become so warped that he could no longer trust his own mind. Were his daughters safe? Were they really his daughters at all? Or had the black-eyed children already taken them? The fear of losing them, or worse, of being the one to hurt them, became all-consuming. I found it chilling how Alan acknowledged this possibility in his last journal entry. "Dear Journal, I'm afraid I'm running out of time. The nightmares are getting worse. Every night, I see them, my own kids, their eyes black as coal, dragging me out of bed, holding me down, making me watch as they do things, unspeakable things to Rosie and Charlie. I don't know if I can trust myself anymore. I'm terrified I'll wake up one day, and it won't just be a nightmare. What if I lose control? What if it's me who hurts them? I don't want to be that man. I can't be that man. My family deserves better. But I don't know how much longer I can fight this. I've started locking myself in the basement at night, just in case. If I do something, I want to make sure it's to me and not them." That was the last coherent entry before the writing devolved into rambling. Alan's entries became scattered, disjointed thoughts, bits and pieces of nightmares, regrets, and overwhelming guilt. He stopped referring to the black-eyed children as something external, and began speaking as though they were a part of him, his thoughts, his urges, his fears, his final words, written in shaky handwriting on the last page, sent a chill down my spine. I can't protect them anymore. They're already here. God forgive me. After that, the journal abruptly ended. There were no more entries, no further explanations. The man who had poured his heart and soul into documenting his struggles had gone silent. I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of sadness and dread. Alan had been fighting for so long, for his sanity, for his family, and in the end, it seemed like the darkness had won, whether it was the black-eyed children or his own deteriorating mental state. Something had finally broken him. But the most unsettling part, I still didn't know what had happened to him or his family. The journals were my only link to Alan's fate, and they offered no closure. For days after finishing the last entry, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Was he still out there, somewhere? Or had the black-eyed children finally claimed him? At first I thought Kim's lake house would be a straightforward job, just another property to clear out and catalog. But the more time I spent there, the more I began to feel unsettled. There was nothing particularly off-putting about the house at first glance. In fact, it was quite charming. The lakefront view was beautiful, and the house was well kept, even cozy. But there was something beneath the surface. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The first strange thing happened when I went into one of the guest bedrooms to clear out some old magazines and empty the closet. As I started boxing up what looked like old fishing gear and board games, I caught a whiff of something strange. It wasn't the typical musty smell of a lake house. This was sharp, metallic, like pennies or rust. I figured it might have been some old tools or forgotten camping gear that had been left damp and was now corroding. but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Later, as I was organizing the items I'd set aside, I noticed something odd about the pacifier with the butterfly pattern. It was so specific, and it didn't seem like something a family with older children would have lying around. I remembered the family mentioning that none of Kim's children had infants, at least not recently. I dismissed it at first, thinking maybe it was from a previous Airbnb guest, or perhaps someone had brought a baby along during a family gathering and left it behind. Still, it didn't sit right with me. I tried to shake off the weird feeling as I continued my work. That evening, I took a break on the porch to watch the sunset over the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the fading pinks and oranges of the sky. It was peaceful, at least it should have been. But as I stood there, taking in the view, I felt this overwhelming sensation that I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck prickled, and my skin crawled with unease. I scanned the area, expecting to see someone on the other side of the lake, or maybe a boat drifting in the distance. But there was no one. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Shaking it off as nothing more than fatigue, I went back inside. I tried to focus on finishing up for the day, boxing more items for donation, trash, and sorting things that seemed sentimental to the family. That's when I found the journal. Tucked away in the bottom drawer of Kim's bedside table was a small, leather-bound journal. The edges were worn, and it had that smell that old books get after years of being forgotten. It wasn't unusual to find personal journals or letters when cleaning out properties like this, but something about this one made me pause. Maybe it was the fact that it had been tucked away so carefully, as if hidden on purpose. Curiosity got the better of me, and I sat down to flip through it. Most of the entries were what you'd expect: notes about family gatherings, trips to the lake, even some musings about the weather or her favorite recipes. But then, as I got further along, the tone of the writing began to shift. Kim started mentioning strange occurrences, lights flickering, hearing footsteps when no one was around, a constant feeling of being watched when she was alone at the lake house. One entry in particular stopped me cold. April 12th. I saw her again today. The little girl by the water. She was standing near the dock, just staring at the house. She didn't move, didn't wave, didn't speak. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. When I went down to check, she was gone, but the air by the water was freezing, colder than it should have been for this time of year. I don't know who she is, but I've seen her before. I think she's trying to tell me something. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the entry. A little girl by the water. Could that have something to do with the pacifier I'd found? I wasn't sure, but the pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made me uneasy. I wanted to keep reading, but just as I was about to turn the page, I heard a noise. It was soft at first, like a gentle tapping, but it grew louder, more insistent. It sounded like knocking, not on the door, but from inside the house, from the walls. At first I thought maybe it was just the old house settling, or maybe a branch tapping against a window. But as I stood there, listening, the knocking continued, steady, rhythmic, coming from the wall, near the kitchen. My heart started to race. I didn't know what was going on, but I suddenly felt very, very alone. I grabbed my things and left the house as quickly as I could, locking the door behind me. As I stood outside, trying to catch my breath, I glanced back at the lake. The water was calm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. I decided to call it a day and head home, but I knew I'd have to come back to finish the job. And when I did, I wasn't sure what else I might find. As I continued thumbing through the ledger, my curiosity deepened. This deer, or whatever it was, had left an impression on nearly every guest who'd stayed at the cabin over the years. What had seemed at first like a harmless local animal had quickly become something far more peculiar. Its appearance in multiple reviews, spanning years, with detailed descriptions of its odd behaviors and physical traits, made me uneasy. The entries began to paint a picture that I couldn't ignore. August 14th, 17. We had such a relaxing time here at the lake house. Our kids loved watching the deer from the porch, especially the one they called Magic. They said it looked like it could talk to them, which I'm sure was just their imaginations running wild, but they were so captivated. The deer would come right up to the edge of the yard and just stare at us. I've never seen an animal act like that before, almost like it was studying us. It was a little unsettling, to be honest, but I guess it's just used to people. Still, we had a wonderful time. 5 stars. Again, with the deer. Every time someone mentioned it, it seemed to be acting a little stranger. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on here than just a tame animal. Then I found the last entry about the deer. 7/30. 29. We stayed here for a family reunion, and it was mostly great. Beautiful spot, clean house, plenty of room for everyone. But the deer, there was something wrong with them. At first, we thought it was cute how close they came to the house, but by the second night, it felt like they were surrounding us. We'd go outside and find them standing at the edge of the trees, not moving, not eating, just watching. My wife wouldn't let the kids go outside after dark because of how weird it got. One of the deer, this big buck with a scar, kept getting closer and closer to the house every night, until one evening we saw it standing on the dock, staring into the cabin like it wanted to come inside. We closed all the curtains and stayed inside after that. The next morning, we found hoof prints all around the porch. I swear, it was trying to get in. 3 stars. That review made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Hoof prints around the house. A deer trying to get inside. This wasn't normal. Not even close. I sat back in the recliner, my mind racing. The more I read, the more this cabin and the deer seemed like something out of a horror movie. I thought about Kim's journal, the entries about the little girl by the water, and now these strange stories about the deer with the pentagram-shaped scar. The two things seemed unrelated at first, but now I wasn't so sure. There was something tying all of this together, something Kim hadn't been able to explain before her death. I closed the ledger and set it aside, feeling unsettled. The air in the cabin felt heavier, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should. I had a sudden urge to leave, to get out of the house and back to the safety of my car, but I knew I still had work to do. If I left now, I'd just have to come back. Taking a deep breath, I decided to focus on something else, anything else. I grabbed the box of sentimental items I'd collected and started organizing them again. The pacifier, the jersey, the pop, it, and the skull earrings were all placed neatly in the box. But then I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. The vanity plate I'd found, the one with the rainbow lettering, wasn't where I had left it. I knew I'd put it in the box with the other items. I remembered handling it, seeing the bright colors, and tossing it in with the rest. But now, it was gone. A chill ran down my spine. I stood up, looking around the room, half expecting to see the plate lying somewhere nearby, maybe having fallen out. But it was nowhere in sight. It hadn't fallen, and it hadn't been misplaced. Someone, or something, had moved it at that moment. The cabin no longer felt cozy. It felt like I wasn't alone. I grabbed my bag and keys, my heart pounding in my chest, and made a beeline for the door. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air hit my face, and I felt a little relief, but the unease lingered. The sun was setting over the lake, casting long shadows across the water, and in the distance, I thought I saw movement by the trees. A deer, standing perfectly still, watching me. It had a scar on its back. I didn't wait to see if it moved closer. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away from Kim's lake house as fast as I could, vowing to never come back alone again. There was something deeply wrong with that place, something Kim knew, and maybe even her family knew, but had never spoken about. Whatever was happening there, it wasn't just a peaceful lake getaway, and whatever that deer was, it wasn't just an animal. The deer stood on the porch, staring up at the spot where the wind chime had been hanging just a short while ago. Its dark, unnatural horns gleamed in the moonlight, and the raw, jagged pentagram scar on its flank pulsed as if freshly etched. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine as I realized that it wasn't just here by coincidence. It knew the wind chime had been taken down. It knew I had taken it down. I stayed frozen at the window, my breath shallow, hoping the deer hadn't noticed me yet. But then, it slowly turned its head, its unnervingly sharp gaze locking directly onto the window where I was standing. The eyes, those goat-like eyes, with the strange horizontal pupils, bored into me, as if sizing me up, deciding whether I was a threat or prey. For a long, horrifying moment, we just stared at each other. My heart pounded so loud, I was sure the deer could hear it. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck as it shifted its weight, the wooden planks of the porch creaking under its hooves. It took another step forward, closer to the door, closer to me. That's when I remembered the wind chime. Maybe it really was some kind of protection, just like that one review had suggested. Maybe it was the only thing keeping whatever force was controlling this deer at bay. Without thinking, I bolted to the table where I had left it, my hands fumbling with the hooks and strings. The wind chime rattled angrily in my grasp as I lifted it, the evil eyes dangling and swinging wildly. The front door creaked, and I whipped around to see the deer press its snout against the wood, sniffing as if testing the barrier between us. Its nostrils flared, and for a moment, I was terrified that it would push the door open. I didn't know if it had the strength to force its way in, but I wasn't about to find out. With trembling hands, I grabbed the small footstool I'd used earlier, placing it under the spot where the wind chime had hung. Climbing up quickly, I hooked the wind chime back into place, its metallic cylinders and gemstones clinking softly. As soon as it was secured, I felt an odd shift in the air, like a pressure lifting. The strange sense of dread that had been creeping up on me ebbed slightly. I heard a low rumbling growl from outside. I jumped down from the stool and rushed back to the window to see the deer standing completely still at the top of the steps. It was glaring up at the wind chime, its body tense, as if it was about to charge. But something seemed to be holding it back. For what felt like an eternity, the deer remained there, its eerie gaze fixed on the wind chime. Then, slowly, it turned its head back toward me, its goat-like eyes narrowing in what I could only describe as rage. It pawed at the porch one last time, the fur around its hooves brushing the wood like a broom, before it slowly backed down the steps and disappeared into the dark forest. I let out a shaky breath, collapsing into one of the chairs by the door. My whole body was trembling, my mind racing to process what had just happened. It wasn't just the deer, it was the forest, it was the cabin. There was something wrong with this entire place, something dark and ancient that had seeped into the land and taken root. I didn't want to stay another minute. I needed to leave. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and began throwing my things into it. I didn't care about finishing the job anymore. Kim's family could sort through the rest on their own. I just needed to get out of there, and fast. As I made my way toward the door, I glanced one last time at the wind chime. The evil eyes swayed gently, their blue irises catching the dim light. There was something about them, something unsettling, yet protective, that made me hesitate. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I leave the wind chime there, where it had been for who knows how long, or take it with me? If it really was some kind of charm, maybe I should bring it, in case whatever force that had taken hold of the deer followed me. But what if it was only effective here, at the cabin? What if taking it would make things worse? I stood there, torn, until a sudden noise from outside snapped me out of my thoughts. It sounded like something moving through the underbrush, something large. My heart rate skyrocketed again. I didn't have time to debate. I grabbed the door handle, threw it open, and ran out to my car, glancing only briefly toward the tree line as I did. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing among the trees, watching me. It was small, child-sized, just like the figure mentioned in the warning review. But when I blinked, it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I didn't look back again. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and sped away from Kim's Lake house, my headlights cutting through the dense night as I drove down the winding road. The further I got from the cabin, the lighter the air seemed to feel, and by the time I reached the main highway, the suffocating pressure in my chest had finally eased. But I knew I wasn't done with this place. Whatever was happening at that cabin, whatever dark force was out there, it wasn't going to be contained by the wind chime forever. And as much as I hated the idea, I had a sinking feeling that I would have to return, not just to finish Kim's affairs, but to find out what was truly hiding in those woods. The tension of that night lingered with me long after I drove away from the cabin, like a shadow, refusing to let go. My heart still raced when I thought about the deer, the grotesque transformation, the sharp grin. It felt like a twisted memory, one that blurred the line between reality and nightmare at home. The wind chime hung by the door, a constant reminder of the horrors that had transpired. I kept it there for protection, as if its presence could ward off whatever darkness lingered beyond my threshold. Every time I heard it chime in the wind, a shiver ran down my spine, but I convinced myself it was better to have it close than to risk unleashing its fury again in the weeks that followed. The news circulated about the family who bought the cabin. They seemed blissfully unaware of the haunting history, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far beyond their comprehension. I heard rumors about strange occurrences, disappearances of pets, children complaining of nightmares, and the eerie feeling of being watched. It all echoed back to that sinister deer, and I hoped they would leave before it turned into something worse. The ledger became my solace, a record of the lives that had touched that place. Each review told a story, a glimpse into joy and horror, intermingled, all tied together by that wretched forest. I had put it on display in my makeshift museum, a testament to what I had endured and the twisted tales I had uncovered. Every visitor who saw it was drawn in, fascinated by the mundane transforming into the macabre. But only I knew the true weight behind the words, the fear hidden between the lines. As time passed, the nightmares receded, replaced by the mundane rhythms of life. I buried myself in my work, focusing on the objects I had collected, the stories they told. Yet, every so often, I'd find myself jolted awake in the dead of night, cold sweat clinging to my skin, haunted by the image of that deer grinning at me. Those were the nights I'd sit up, staring at the wind chime, the moonlight casting eerie shadows through my window. I began to wonder if I'd ever truly escaped the grip of that place. Was the wind chime really a protector, or had it become a tether, binding me to the horrors I thought I had left behind? I started to keep a closer eye on my dream catchers, rearranging them in the hopes they'd catch any remnants of fear and despair before they could take root in my mind. Sometimes I'd go through the old reviews in the ledger, searching for clues or hints about the deer, the forest, anything that could help me understand. I came across entries that spoke of local legends, stories of spirits residing within the trees, of animals cursed to protect the secrets of the woods. One particularly chilling account recounted a family who had tried to capture the deer, only to vanish without a trace. Those tales made my skin crawl, yet they also sparked a burning curiosity. I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the kid who went missing after the house was sold. Had they wandered too close to the woods? Did they encounter the same twisted creature I had? I felt an unsettling sense of responsibility, as if I hadn't done enough to warn the world about the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of that idyllic retreat. Despite the unease, I found myself yearning for the thrill of uncovering more stories, diving deeper into the shadows that had once threatened to consume me. I started attending local folklore gatherings, listening to the whispers of old tales and legends. Each story reminded me of that fateful night, and I couldn't help but share my own, carefully omitting the most horrifying details, while still imparting the gravity of what I had experienced. My connection to the wind chime deepened, and in an odd way, it became a part of my identity. I was the curator of the strange and unusual, the keeper of stories that skirted the edges of reality. And while the nightmares still crept back, occasionally, I embraced them as a part of my journey, a reminder of the boundaries between light and dark. I learned to appreciate the calm that followed the storm, the moments when the wind would catch the chimes just right, filling my home with a soft, melodic sound. It felt like a dance with fate, a reminder that though darkness may linger, there was also light, beauty, and resilience. I'd faced the terror head on and come out the other side, ready to embrace whatever came next, armed with my stories and my wind chime. When I was young, maybe 10 or 11, I used to love staying at my cousin Derek's house out in Shiprock, New Mexico. His family lived on a small patch of land near the edge of the Navajo Nation, where the desert stretched flat and red for miles. There were no neighbors close by, just old fences, sagebrush, and silence. One summer, something started watching us, and it started with a dog. We first saw it one evening, just sitting outside the barbed wire fence. A huge black dog with a thick neck, long limbs, and white eyes. No shine, no pupils, just white. It didn't bark, didn't move, just stared. Derek's dad threw a rock at it, told us not to look at it anymore, and shut the blinds. That night, something scratched at the front door. 3 slow drags, then silence, then tapping on the window. Above my head, I didn't sleep. Neither did Derek. We kept a blanket pulled over our heads, whispering to each other in the dark. In the morning, there were no tracks, no sign of the dog, but a small dead rabbit had been placed right on the front step. Its eyes were missing. A week went by with no sign of the dog. We thought maybe it moved on. Then Derek's mom called us in for dinner one night, and we saw it again, right by the shed, standing upright, like a man. The shape of it was wrong. Its back to long shoulders, arched, head tilted like it didn't know how to carry itself. But its eyes, still white, still staring. That night, Derek's dad sat us both down and told us not to speak its name, not to call out into the night, not to talk about it after dark. He burned cedar and spread ash in a perfect line along every windowsill. But around 2 a.m., the dog came back. This time, we heard it speak. Not bark, speak, in our grandma's voice. "Come outside, boys. I brought fry bread." I wanted to believe it, but I knew our grandma lived 2 towns over, and she wasn't coming to visit until the weekend. We stayed frozen, too scared to even breathe. Then came the scratching again, longer this time, desperate. And then it laughed, not a bark, not a growl, a laugh like someone pretending to be human but getting it just a little wrong. The next morning, the front door was wide open, the line of ash broken. Derek's dad didn't say a word. He just packed us into the truck and took us to stay with our aunt in Gallup for the rest of the summer. He never told us what he saw that night, but he sold the house a month later, and he's never gone back. I still have dreams about that dog. Sometimes it's sitting at the foot of my bed. Sometimes it stands at the edge of a hallway. And sometimes I hear it outside the window, scratching, waiting, whispering in a voice I loved once. But I know better now. No matter what it says, I never open the door. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. I was 24, fresh out of college, and trying to reconnect with my older brother, James. We'd drifted apart after our parents' divorce, and he thought some time in nature would help. He picked a remote hiking trail in southern Utah, near Navajo territory. A place he said he found on some backwoods forum. There was barely a map. No official park signs. Just red dirt, scrubland, and miles of silence. We parked the truck near an old cattle gate, loaded our gear, and started walking. For the first few hours, everything was fine. Hot sun, buzzing flies, the crunch of boots on dry gravel. But then we found the ditch. It was about 8 feet deep, running parallel to the trail, like a long scar. James paused and stared at it. "Wasn't on the map," he muttered. "Looks like it was dug recently." I stepped closer and saw something that made my skin crawl. Hoof prints. But they weren't right. They were shaped like deer prints, but too wide and deeper than they should have been. Heavy wrong. Probably just some big elk. James shrugged. But I'd hunted elk. These weren't elk tracks. That night, we set up camp under a canopy of stars. The fire crackled low, and we passed a flask back and forth, trying to laugh off the weird tracks. Then, we heard the scream. Not a coyote, not a mountain lion. Something in between, long drawn out, and laced with human pain. It echoed through the trees, rising and falling like it was circling us. We froze. James grabbed a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center. I didn't believe in any of it. Not ghosts, not monsters, not folklore. I was the skeptic of our group, always rolling my eyes when someone brought up creepy local legends. That changed the summer. I took a camping trip with 3 friends in northern New Mexico, not far from the Chuska Mountains. The plan was simple. Disconnect for a few days, hike, fish, and tell dumb stories by the fire. We were all in our late 20s, still hanging on to the illusion that adulthood didn't mean giving up. Adventure. The first 2 days were perfect. We pitched our tents near an old arroyo that cut through the red earth like a scar. During the day, we explored. Night, we drank beer by the fire and talked about everything and nothing. On the third night, though, things turned. That evening, we saw a coyote standing just beyond the ring of firelight. Its eyes reflected the flames, and it didn't move, even when we threw a rock at it to scare it off. It just watched. "Creepy little bastard," I remember saying, laughing nervously. But something about it made us all uneasy. It finally slunk off into the darkness after a few long minutes. Later, after everyone had passed out, I woke up needing to pee. I stepped out of my tent and walked a short distance from camp, flashlight in hand. That's when I saw it again, the same coyote. Sitting silently on the ridge above us, still watching. I pointed the light at it. It didn't flinch, and then it spoke. Not a growl, not a howl. Words, it said. "You left the circle." I froze. The voice was dry, cracked, almost whispery, but unmistakably human. I thought I was losing my mind. I turned and ran back to the tent, yelling to wake the others. Of course, they didn't believe me at first. They checked for footprints, laughed it off as a dream or too much beer. But we decided to pack up early the next morning anyway. Except when we tried to leave, we couldn't find the trail. I know that sounds dumb. We had GPS, maps, even marked trees like amateur Boy Scouts. But none of it made sense anymore. The arroyo twisted in ways it hadn't before. Familiar landmarks vanished. It was like the land had shifted while we slept. And then we saw them. Not just one coyote, but dozens, standing on the ridges around us, watching every time we turned. Another one was there, closer than before. One of them limped forward, Its front leg hung strangely, like it had been broken and never healed. It stopped just a few yards from me, stared into my eyes, and said, in my brother's voice, "You shouldn't have come here." That's when we started running. I don't even remember how we got out. The next thing I knew, we were stumbling onto a dirt road and flagging down a rancher in a pickup. We never went back to get our gear. Never talked about it again after that day. But something followed me. I know it, because sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear a voice outside my window that doesn't belong to anyone I know, and it always says the same thing: "You left the circle." One evening I was dizzy from working double shifts at the factory. I finally crawled into bed around midnight, hoping to sleep off the exhaustion. I lived alone in a small cabin on the outskirts of a Navajo reservation, a place where the land seemed to stretch forever, and sometimes it felt like the shadows did too. I wasn't expecting company. I woke up suddenly, eyes wide, because there was a noise outside my bedroom window. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the usual rustle of coyotes or the soft tapping of pine needles. It was breathing heavy, slow breathing. I blinked and tried to convince myself I was dreaming, but then I saw it. A tall figure crouched, just outside the glass. No eyes, just empty sockets where they should have been. Its skin looked like cracked earth, dry, dark, and peeling. The creature's head was twisted at a sharp angle, almost unnatural. It raised one hand and pressed it flat against the window. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It didn't say a word. It didn't move for what felt like hours, just stared after what seemed like an eternity. It suddenly vanished. No footsteps, no sounds, just the cold that lingered in the air after it disappeared. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I found deep scratches on the outside of the window frame, long, jagged gouges, as if something was trying to get in. Later that day, my neighbor told me about a series of strange disappearances in the area, people vanishing near the same time I saw the figure. He mentioned something his grandfather said about beings that take on shapes to terrorize and sometimes replace their victims. I don't know if it was that creature or something worse, but I know one thing. When the shape came to my window that night, it wasn't just passing through. It was looking for something, and I'm afraid it might come back. I was 17 when it happened to me. We were staying at my uncle's trailer out near Tahachi for the summer. My parents thought the quiet would keep me out of trouble. No signal, no friends, just desert and stars. My brother Leo had just turned 13, and the two of us would hike the trails during the day, then sit up on the roof of the trailer at night, staring at the constellations. One night, everything changed. It started with a whistle. Not the wind, an actual whistle, human-tuned. It came from just past the ridge, where the pinyon trees cast long, crooked shadows. Leo was already inside, brushing his teeth, so I figured it was my uncle, or maybe a ranch hand nearby. But then I heard my own name, spoken softly, like someone was calling me into the dark. "Mason, come here." It was Leo's voice, but Leo was inside. I turned, confused, and saw him through the window. He was standing by the sink, brushing his teeth, just like I thought. But the voice outside called again. Same tone, same rhythm. "Mason, hurry." That's when the air turned wrong, heavy, like everything around me was pressing in. I couldn't move. My arms and legs felt like wet sandbags. Then, through the trees, I saw something step forward. It looked like Leo. Same pajamas, same posture, but its arms hung too long, and the way it moved was broken, jerky, like it had learned how to walk by watching a film in reverse. It opened its mouth, too wide, and said again, "Come here, Mason. I found something." That was the moment I knew it wasn't him. It wasn't even human. I slid off the roof, landing hard on my ankle, and scrambled inside, locking the trailer door behind me. Leo saw my face and asked what happened. I pulled him into the back room, without answering, and told him not to come out, no matter what he heard. Then we both heard it, knocking. 3 slow taps on the door. "Let me in, Mason, it's cold." Leo looked at me and whispered, "That sounds like me." I nodded, and we waited. All night. We heard it circle the trailer, sometimes scratching the aluminum siding, sometimes tapping the windows. Once it even whispered Leo's name, from behind the wall just as the sun rose. Everything stopped. We peeked outside. Nothing except one long, muddy footprint on the steps. Not a shoe print, not bare feet, something in between. We left that morning. My uncle didn't question it, just nodded, burned cedar in every corner, and made us pour salt and ash along the property line. We never talked about it again, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up to a whistle, one I haven't heard in years, and sometimes I hear my brother's voice, even when he's not home. One night something happened which I cannot forget. My friend Rosie and I had just left a house party in Gallup, New Mexico. It was around 11 p.m., and the air was thick with desert heat. We were both a little buzzed, not from drinking, but from laughing too hard, singing old songs in her beat. Up Honda, as we made our way back toward Chinle. To save time, Rosie suggested we take the service road that cut through the mesas instead of the highway. That decision still haunts me. At first, it felt fun, like we were teenagers again, blasting music, windows down, dirt flying behind us. But about 15 minutes in, everything got quiet, too quiet, no bugs, no wind. Even the engine sounded like it was muffled. Then we saw something up ahead, a shape, standing in the middle of the road. Rosie slowed the car. It looked like a man, tall, thin, shirtless, but his skin was pale, almost gray, and something about his limbs looked too long. He didn't move, just stood there, so still. I thought he might be a statue. Then he turned, just his head, snapped it toward us like an animal hearing a sound. His eyes were white, not glowing, just white. Rosie panicked and tried to reverse, but the tires spun out in the dirt. That's when it started running fast on all fours. But wrong. Its arms bent backwards, knees wide, body twisting like it didn't belong inside itself. It leaped onto the hood and stared at us through the windshield. Its face looked like it had once been human, but it was stretched, distorted, like someone had worn it too long. Then it opened its mouth and spoke. "I know your names," I screamed. Rosie hit the gas, and somehow the tires caught traction. The thing rolled off the hood and we tore down the dirt road like the devil himself was chasing us. When we hit the pavement of the main highway, Rosie didn't stop until we were under streetlights again. We didn't talk for a full 10 minutes, just sat in silence, shaking. We got back to Chinle around midnight. Rosie was pale, silent. The next day, she wouldn't answer my texts, or the next. Her mom called me, frantic. Rosie had locked herself in her room and wouldn't come out. When they finally got the door open, she was gone, window wide open, no footprints, just 3 claw marks across the inside of her bedroom door. The police called it a runaway, but I know what I saw, and I know that thing knew her name. I drive the long way now, always, even if it takes twice as long, because once you've seen something like that, something that can speak your name in a voice that doesn't blink or breathe, you never take shortcuts through the dark again. was driving through the Navajo Nation late one night, heading to Flagstaff from Santa Fe. I had taken the long way, Highway 264, because I wanted to avoid the main interstates and soak in the quiet desert landscape. Just me, a thermos of coffee, and the glow of the dashboard under a moonless sky. It was just after 2 a.m. when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a dog. It darted into the road about 300 feet ahead, crossed in one leap, then vanished into the brush. I tapped the brakes and squinted. I hadn't passed another car in nearly an hour, and I felt the strange weight of isolation press in all around me. I kept driving, but something felt wrong. 5 minutes later, I saw it again, only this time, it didn't cross the road. It ran alongside me. I was going 50, then 60. It kept pace. I glanced out the window, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't a dog. It was tall, maybe 6 feet, with long, angular limbs. Its back was hunched, and its skin was the color of ash. But the worst part was the face. It looked stretched, like a human mask pulled too tight over the wrong kind of skull. The eyes were empty, not just dark, empty, like looking into a well that had no bottom. I floored the gas. My tires kicked dust behind me, and the car rattled on the uneven asphalt. It disappeared from the corner of my vision, and I thought maybe I lost it. Then it knocked on my window. Just 3 taps. Soft, polite. I screamed and swerved, barely keeping the car on the road. When I looked again, it was gone. My heart was pounding. So loud I didn't hear the low hum at first. Then the radio came on. I hadn't touched it. There was no music, just static. And underneath it, breathing. Deep, slow, wet breathing, like something just behind the speakers. Then a voice whispered, "You looked at me." I ripped the power cord from the dash. The radio died. The silence was worse. I didn't stop driving until I reached the outskirts of Flagstaff and pulled into a gas station, pale and shaking. The attendant didn't ask questions when I parked under the lights and refused to leave until sunrise. Later that morning, I told a Navajo woman at a local diner what I'd seen. She didn't laugh, didn't call me crazy. She just nodded once and said, "Skinwalker. It followed you because you noticed it. You gave it your attention." She told me not to say its name again, not to speak of it at night, not to think of its eyes before I sleep. I haven't taken that highway again, and I've never driven alone through the desert since. My name is Marcus Wells. Growing up in a small town in Arkansas, the local river and creek were our playgrounds, especially Blue Water Creek. Most people thought it was just a sleepy, slow-moving stream, but around here, stories travel like wildfire, especially about the whispering catfish. No one talked much about it openly, but I heard the whispers as a kid, stories about a giant, shadowy fish that would drag people under the water at night, especially those who dared to fish alone. I never believed it until the summer I turned 19. That summer, the drought hit hard. The creek's water level was lower than I'd ever seen. The fish were scarce, so I decided to try my luck fishing late at night. Just me, my rod, and the moonlight. About midnight, as I settled by the water's edge, I noticed a strange stillness. No crickets, no frogs, nothing. The water's surface started to ripple, and a soft whispering rose up from the depths. It wasn't human words, but something almost like a voice, drawn out, rhythmic, and haunting. Then, a shape broke the surface, not a fish, something enormous, scales glimmering black under the moon. 2 eyes stared directly at me, cold, deep, and unblinking. I froze. My fishing rod slipped from my hands into the water. The whispering catfish swirled beneath the surface, its long whiskers brushing the bank. The whispers turned into a chorus, a strange song that seemed to crawl under my skin, filling my head with images. I saw faces, people I knew, old men from town, fishermen, kids who had drowned in the creek over the years. They were trapped in the dark water, reaching out, mouths open in silent screams. Suddenly, cold water splashed my feet. I looked down. The catfish was at the edge of the bank, its massive body, nearly half my height. It opened its mouth, and the whispering became louder, more urgent. It felt like a warning, or a plea. I ran, never looked back. The next day I found my fishing rod on the bank, broken in half, and scratched with strange, claw-like marks. From then on, the creek was off limits for me. Years later, I learned that many people in our town had lost loved ones to the creek. Disappearances, drownings, sometimes bodies never found. The old-timers said the whispering catfish was a guardian of the water, punishing those who took too much or came at the wrong time. I'm not sure what I saw that night, but sometimes, when I pass Blue Water Creek, I swear I hear whispers carried on the wind, voices calling from beneath the water, waiting for the next visitor. I was 17 this summer it happened. My parents had sent me to stay with my grandmother in Gallup, New Mexico, while they dealt with my dad's medical issues in the city. Grandma's house was isolated, an old adobe home on the edge of the high desert, with no neighbors for miles. She lived simple: candles, well water, wood stove, no TV, no internet. I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. But then, the scratching started. The first night it happened, I thought it was a coyote pawing at the door. Grandma just muttered something in Navajo under her breath and tossed cedar dust into the fire. The flames flared green for a second. "Don't open any doors at night," she warned. That was all she said. By the third night, the scratching had become scraping like long fingernails against wood, and not just the front door, windows too. It circled the house, slowly. Whatever it was, it wanted in. That's when I heard it speak. It was my mother's voice. "Sweetheart, open up. I came early. It's me. Let me in, baby." I shot up from bed. My heart was pounding, but the voice, it sounded perfect. Too perfect. Like it was copied from a memory. I peeked through the window and froze. There was someone standing at the door. She looked exactly like my mother. Same face, same hair, same blue sweater from that Christmas years ago. But she was just standing there, unmoving, like a mannequin. And her eyes, something was wrong with them. Too black, too wide. She smiled. "Don't you love me anymore?" I slammed the curtain shut. I heard footsteps then, fast and heavy, circling the house again. Windows shook. The voice called from every direction. My mom, my dad, even my little brother's voice from years ago. I clutched my grandmother's old rosary and cried quietly. Just before dawn, it stopped. The next morning, Grandma saw my pale face and knew. She sat me down and placed a pouch of herbs in my hand. "You saw one of them, a Skinwalker. It wore your mother's face, but it wasn't her. They do that when they want your soul to open the door." I asked her how she knew. She looked out the window with tired eyes and whispered, "Because years ago, it wore my sister's." That night, I stayed up with Grandma. She burned sage and chanted old words. Just after midnight, the voice came back. "Mine dot from the door," it whispered. "Please, let me back in. I'm cold." Grandma didn't even blink. "Don't speak to it," she said. "Don't even think about opening that door." The next day, I called my parents. They were safe, still in the hospital. Nothing had changed, but something had changed in me. Now, even back in the city, I keep a pouch of cedar by my bed. I don't open doors after dark. and when the wind howls just right and carries voices that sound too familiar, I turn away, because the Skinwalker remembers, and it never comes wearing its own face. One night something happened, which I cannot forget, no matter how many times I try to reason it away or chalk it up to a bad dream. I was 25, living in Gallup, New Mexico, working construction during the week and spending weekends helping my aunt near Window Rock with her livestock. That particular weekend, I stayed later than usual. One of her goats had gone missing, and she was convinced it wasn't just coyotes. She'd found the fence torn open, not chewed, not dug under, torn, like something with hands had grabbed and yanked. That night, I found out she was right. It started with the smell, not outside. Inside the house, I was on the pole, out couch in the living room, dozing off, when I caught the scent, sharp and raw, like meat left too long in the heat. Not rotting, exactly. Fresher, more metallic. Then came the sounds, scraping on the walls, slow, deliberate steps on the roof, and finally, the voice. "Miguel, come outside. I need to talk to you." It was my Uncle Jorge's voice, but he'd been dead 5 years. I froze. I didn't move, didn't even blink. "Miguel," the voice was right outside the window now, barely muffled by the curtain. "It's me, Mia. Let me in." But the voice didn't sound tired or warm like my uncle's had. It was too clear, too crisp, like someone imitating him through a speaker. I held my breath. The air inside the room was thick, so heavy it felt like it was pressing down on my chest. I waited, and then I heard it start scratching the glass. Click, click, click. Not claws. Nails, human, but too long, too sharp. The scratching stopped. I thought maybe it had left, but that smell, the blood, metal smell, was stronger now. Then I heard it sniffing. "Right outside, you smell like your mother." My stomach twisted. It wasn't a compliment, it was a threat. I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, it was gone. I stepped outside and found faint prints in the red dirt beneath the window. Bare feet, but wrong. Too long, too narrow, like they'd been stretched. The worst part, the smell followed me back to Gallup, to my apartment. 4 days after, I would catch a whiff of that scent in my hallway, or in the shower, or behind me at the gas station, and sometimes at night. I swear I hear breathing outside my window, shallow, measured. Waiting. I don't talk about it much. My aunt says it was a skinwalker, that it marked me. She gave me crushed juniper and ash in a pouch to hang over my door, said not to throw it away, even if the smell fades. So far it hasn't, and every few weeks, the voice returns. A little closer, a little more familiar. One evening I was dizzy from the heat and dust after helping my cousin Samuel dig post holes out on the far side of his family's property near Shiprock, New Mexico. We'd been working since morning, trying to fix up a collapsed section of the fence line, and the sun had baked the land until even the lizards gave up and hid. We were just about to pack up when Sam's shovel hit something. It wasn't rock. It rang like metal striking bone. And when we cleared the dirt around it, we found something neither of us was ready for. It was wrapped in an old Navajo blanket, rotted through, but with strange symbols drawn all over it in faded white chalk. There were feathers tied into the edges, and inside, bones. Animal bones, but not from any creature I could name. Long femurs, sharp, unnatural teeth, a skull that looked too narrow to be coyote, too pointed to be human. Samuel's face went pale the moment he saw it. He didn't say a word, just stood up, walked to the truck, grabbed his can of gas, and came back. I thought I buried this thing. Good, he muttered. Then he doused it in gasoline and lit it on fire. The flames didn't roar. They hissed, like whatever was inside the blanket was wet, or trying to scream through the fire. We stood there, shielding our faces, not talking, only. When the flames died down, did Samuel speak. You don't tell anyone, understand? I nodded, too afraid to ask. But later that night, something came back. I was sleeping on the couch in Sam's trailer when I woke up to a scratching sound. Soft, slow, deliberate. It wasn't a mouse, it was fingernails on aluminum. Then came the smell, like old blood and dirt, and something rotting in the sun, and the voice. You took what was mine. I sat up, heart pounding. And standing outside the screen door was a shape. Tall, hunched, wearing a dead animal's skin over its shoulders. Its eyes burned, not with fire, but with hate. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It just stood there, staring at me. The shadows made its face blur, shift. One moment it looked like Sam, then like me, then like something else entirely. Then it stepped back, sank into the dark, and vanished. When Sam came out, gun in hand, it was already gone. He didn't ask what I saw, just sat down beside me and said, "That's what happens when you try to bury something that ain't dead." I left the next morning and never went back. 3 weeks later, Samuel disappeared. They said his truck was found on the side of the road, engine running, door open, no signs of a struggle. But I know better. He dug up something sacred, something ancient. And whatever it was, it came back for him. When I was young, maybe 8 or 9, I used to spend weekends with my Uncle Ray on his ranch in northeastern Arizona. He lived alone, kept sheep, and didn't talk much. But I liked it out there, how quiet it was, how the stars looked like a blanket full of pinholes. That was also the year I learned to be afraid of the dark, in a way I've never really shaken. It started with a knock on the window. I was sleeping in the spare room, tucked under 3 blankets, when I heard it, tap, tap, tap. I froze. The window was right by my head, just a thin pane of glass and a screen between me and whatever was out there. I listened, and then came a voice. "You awake, little man?" It was soft, almost playful, but it wasn't Uncle Ray. I didn't answer. I just pulled the blanket up to my nose. But the tapping started again, slower this time. Tap. Wait. Tap. Come open the window. Just want to see you. My whole body went cold. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. But then the voice changed. It shifted. It turned into my mom's voice. "Honey, open up. I'm out here. I need you." Only my mom wasn't anywhere near the ranch. She was 5 hours away, back in Holbrook. I finally screamed. Uncle Ray came running, shotgun in hand. But by the time he got there, whatever it was had already gone. We found the screen ripped clean off, and below the window, bare footprints in the dirt, but not normal ones. These toes were long, too long, like claws. The heel was shaped wrong, almost backward. Uncle Ray made me sleep in his room for the rest of the weekend. The next morning, he walked the perimeter of the house, mumbling prayers in Dine and sprinkling crushed ash in a circle. He wouldn't tell me what he was saying, only that it was protection. Before I left that Sunday, he bent down to my level and looked me right in the eye. "If anything ever calls to you at night," he said, "no matter whose voice it wears, don't answer. You understand?" I nodded, and I've remembered that ever since. Now I'm 30. I live in a completely different state, different house, different life. But last month, I woke up to a soft knocking on my bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. And a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years whispered, "Little man, Are you still awake? I never believed in Skinwalkers. I always thought they were just stories, tales passed down by locals to scare tourists. Much like Bigfoot or the Jersey Devil. I was wrong. It was 3 years ago, during the summer, when my friend Jacob invited me to spend a weekend at his family's cabin in the mountains. It was supposed to be a weekend of hiking, fishing, and escaping the noise of city life. I wasn't prepared for what we were about to experience. The cabin was located in a remote part of northern Arizona, near the Navajo reservation. It wasn't accessible by paved roads. You had to drive down dirt trails, through thick pine forests, and cross a few streams. It was exactly the kind of place I wanted to escape to. Jacob had been coming here every year with his family since he was a kid, and he swore by the tranquility it provided. When we arrived, I noticed the place was isolated, and not a single other cabin was in sight for miles. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of branches in the wind and the distant calls of birds. It felt peaceful, but there was something about it, the way the woods felt alive, like they were watching us. I dismissed it as overactive imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The first night, everything seemed fine. We sat around the fire pit, drinking beer and talking about old times. Jacob's father had built the cabin, and they had used it as a getaway for decades. As the night grew darker, the wind picked up, making the trees creak and groan. Then we heard it at first. I thought it was an animal, maybe a coyote or some other wildlife, but as it came closer, I realized it was something else. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard, a low guttural growl, followed by what sounded like footsteps. Jacob and I exchanged nervous glances, and I noticed that his expression had changed. His father, who had been telling a story, stopped mid-sentence and looked around the campfire. "It's probably just a bear," I said, trying to ease the tension. Jacob's father shook his head. "Bears don't walk that quietly," he murmured, his voice tight. "That's something else." He stood up slowly, his eyes scanning the darkness between the trees. "We need to get inside, now." We all rushed into the cabin, and Jacob locked the door behind us. The growling continued outside, now accompanied by the unmistakable sound of something heavy brushing against the side of the cabin. There was a moment of eerie silence, followed by a loud thud, something slamming into the wall. It was then that we heard it. A voice that wasn't quite human. "Jacob, help me. Let me in." It sounded like his mother. Her voice was distorted, trembling, and mixed with the growls, making it impossible to tell whether it was truly her. But Jacob's face turned pale as he bolted to the window. "No," he whispered, backing away from the glass. "It's not her." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" That's not my mom's voice," he said, shaking. "My mom, she's gone. She passed away years ago." His father's eyes darkened. "Stay inside. Don't open that door. Don't let it in." The sounds outside grew louder. Scratching, tapping, and then scratching at the door. "Jacob, please let me in. It's cold." This time, the voice was close. Too close. Jacob's father grabbed him by the shoulders, his grip tight. "Do you remember what I told you?" "What?" "We never speak of." Jacob nodded, wide-eyed. "We don't let them in," his father said in a hoarse whisper. "Skinwalkers. They can mimic the voices of anyone they want. If they want you to let them in, it's because they're not human." I could hear the terror in his voice. Jacob had gone pale as the color drained from his face. His father turned to me, his face grim. "It's not your friend outside. Whatever you hear, you don't open that door." And then it came. The thing outside the door stopped scratching. The voice changed again. This time, it was my voice. It called out to me, pleading, begging for help. "Please, Help me. It's cold. I'm out here in the woods alone. I froze. Jacob's father stood between me and the door. Stay back, he warned me. Don't even look outside. The voice outside continued, but this time it was accompanied by a low, almost gurgling laugh. It wasn't my voice anymore. It was something darker, deeper, something that wasn't human. The growls resumed, but now they were closer, more aggressive. The walls of the cabin creaked as something heavy brushed against them. I felt the floor vibrate beneath my feet, and I could sense that whatever it was, whatever they were, was circling the cabin. Suddenly, the growls stopped. Silence. Jacob's father moved swiftly, bolting all the shutters on the windows. He checked every door, making sure it was secure. Then, in a voice almost too quiet to hear, he spoke again. They're not done with us. They'll come back. We'll stay locked in here until the sun comes up. That night felt like it lasted an eternity. The growls and the voices never stopped, just circling the cabin in an endless loop. In the morning, we finally dared to leave the cabin, though the woods felt strangely empty. The air was still thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to move in ways it shouldn't. We packed up and left as quickly as possible, but the sound of that voice, my voice, haunts me to this day. I don't know if it was the wind playing tricks or something darker, but I know this. Some stories aren't just myths, and sometimes the things you hear in the dark aren't human at all. We were deep in Navajo country, camping on Bureau of Land Management territory. Me, my college roommate Terry, and his cousin Marcus, who had grown up in the area. It was supposed to be a bonding weekend. No phones, no GPS, just firewood, beer, and stories. The kind of trip you remember for the peace, not the terror. We set up camp near a dry creek bed just past sundown. The desert was quiet, except for the wind rustling through the juniper. Marcus built a fire while Terry dug out his speaker and started playing old outlaw country. But Marcus frowned. Double quotes. Turn it off, he said. Sharp. Terry chuckled. What? You scared the coyotes are gonna sue us for noise pollution. Marcus didn't laugh. They hear music. They get curious. And some of what walks these lands, you don't want it curious. That killed the mood real quick. We sat in silence for a bit. Then Marcus leaned forward and said, You want to hear something real? He told us about Skinwalkers. Said his grandmother once saw one wearing the face of her dead brother, standing in her backyard at dawn. Said his uncle chased what looked like a dog on two legs off their land, only to find a neighbor, naked and dazed, walking out of the woods an hour later. We all laughed nervously. Ghost stories, campfire tales. But Marcus didn't crack a smile. The fire burned low. That's when we heard it. A woman's voice, crying, from just beyond the firelight. Sounded like it was coming from across the creek bed. Marcus stood up immediately. Get inside the truck. Now, Terry whispered. Maybe she's hurt. No one cries out here at night unless they want something. We hesitated too long. A shape stepped into view, just outside the reach of the flames. A woman, bent over, with impossibly long limbs and tangled hair that looked more like animal fur. She wasn't crying anymore. She was mimicking it, repeating the same sob over and over like a recording. Glitching. Marcus picked up a burning log from the fire, holding it like a torch. The woman hissed. I swear to God, her skin shifted, like it was crawling over something else, and her eyes, flat, reflective like a goat's, locked onto me. She spoke with my voice. Help me, please. We ran. We didn't stop until we were inside the truck, tires spinning in red dirt. Marcus drove like a man possessed, muttering a prayer under his breath the entire way back to the highway. None of us spoke for the rest of the night. Later, When I checked the audio recorder I'd brought to document the trip, I found the firelight, crackling, our stories, laughter, and over it, a voice. My voice. But it was whispering things I never said, things I've never thought, things that still make my skin crawl. I was 17 when it happened to me, during a dry October in Tallahatchie, New Mexico. My older brother, Ruben, had just come home from basic training. He looked thinner, sharper than I remembered, but still had that same loud laugh and the habit of leaving his boots in the middle of the hallway. That weekend, our parents left for a funeral and Ruben and I stayed behind. He said he didn't feel like being around people. I figured he just wanted some quiet. But what we got that weekend wasn't peace, it was something else. The first night was fine. We stayed up late, watched old tapes, and ate beans and fry bread until we both passed out on the living room floor. The next day, though Ruben was off, he barely spoke, just stared out the window for hours. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to this weird dragging noise, like someone pulling themselves across the wooden floor. Then a faint knock on the back door, soft, uneven. I figured it was just the wind, but Ruben wasn't in his bed. I found him standing in the kitchen, lights off, eyes wide, knife in his hand. He whispered, "It's here." Before I could ask what he meant, the knock came again, louder. Then I heard something whisper my name, but it didn't sound right. It sounded like someone trying to sound like me, like my voice was being copied, stretched, mimicked. Ruben motioned for me to stay low. "I saw it this morning," he said, "across the hill, watching." He didn't explain, just poured salt across every windowsill and drew protection symbols, with white ash. That's when we heard it crawl along the side of the house. No footsteps, just dragging, like elbows and knees scraping the dirt. Then came the voice again, "Ruben, let me in. It's me, T." That's what Ruben used to call me, a family nickname. No one else knew it. I looked at him, terrified. He whispered, "It's not you. It wears people like skin." We turned off the lights and waited. That thing circled the house 4 hours. I swear I heard it laughing sometimes. Other times, it sobbed like a child. Then, just before sunrise, it scratched on the window behind us. We didn't turn around. We didn't speak. And finally, it left when our parents got back. We didn't say anything. But Ruben sat me down that night and told me everything. He said one of the drill sergeants at boot camp had told them about Skinwalkers, things that could wear the shape of anyone they wanted, if they had enough of your scent or a piece of your body. Ruben remembered that he'd bled into the dirt one morning near the canyon. He thinks that was enough. We never saw it again. But we moved a month later, and to this day, I never speak that nickname out loud, because if it calls out to me again, I want to know it's not family. My name is Daniel Whitefeather. I grew up on the Navajo Reservation in Chinle, Arizona, at the edge of the canyons. Our home sat alone on a stretch of red dirt, surrounded by flat, open desert, with the Chuska Mountains in the distance. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me stories, real stories, not the kind you'd find in books. Stories about the things that walk at night, he said. You can't fight them like people. You don't look at them too long. And most of all, you don't open the door when they knock. I never really understood why, until the night something came that sounded just like him. I was 24 when my dad passed. Heart attack. Quiet. Sudden. I inherited the old house. Started fixing it up. Stayed out there by myself most nights. Nothing but stars and wind for company. One evening, around 10:30, I was out back repairing the fence line when I heard a voice from the front porch. "Danny boy, you out here?" I dropped the hammer. That was my father's voice, exactly same rough cadence, same nickname. He'd been dead almost a year. I stood, frozen for a full minute. Then it knocked on the front door, 3 times, just like my dad used to knock. 2 quick taps, pause, then a firm third. My legs moved before my brain did. I went to the front of the house, looked out the peephole. No one there, but I felt it, like someone was waiting, right up against the door. No breath, no shuffle, just waiting. I called out, "Who is it?" The voice came again. "Danny, it's me, son. I forgot my boots inside. Let me in." I backed away. I'd buried his boots with him. I grabbed cedar and ash from the kitchen drawer, what my grandmother always told us to keep close. I lit it, whispered the prayer she taught me, and set the ash line in front of the door. Then it knocked again, harder this time. 3 perfect knocks. I swear, the door bent inward a little. Then came the scraping, long, slow drags of what sounded like claws over wood. I heard my father's voice whisper through the cracks, "I'm cold out here, Danny. Don't you miss me?" I didn't speak, didn't breathe. That's when the porch boards creaked. I inched toward the window and peeked. There was something standing on the edge of the shadows, tall, hunched, wearing my father's face like a poorly stretched mask. Its limbs were too long. Its neck craned sideways like it had been broken and snapped back wrong. And in its left hand, his old leather boots. I ran into the back room, grabbed my dad's old shotgun. Not because I thought I could kill it, but because I needed something in my hands. When I came back, it was gone. Only the smell remained, like rotting hide and burnt hair. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't sleep much for weeks. Later, I went to see an elder, Mary Thatch, who lived near many farms. I told her what happened. She looked at me, dead serious, and said, "That wasn't your father. That was a skinwalker, trying on his memory, trying to be invited in." Then she handed me a pouch of corn pollen, ashes, and said, "You survived because you remembered who you are and who your father was. I still live out here, but I don't go outside after dark, and I never answer the door when it knocks, because I know it's still out there, and one night, it might come back with my mother's voice." My name is Claire Hernandez. I used to work as a night nurse at a small hospital on the edge of the Navajo Nation, near Gallup, New Mexico. I've seen a lot of strange things during overnight shifts. People talking to invisible figures, sudden, cold spots in quiet rooms, even patients who swore they were being watched from the windows. But none of that prepared me for the night I heard that whistling dot, or what came with it. It was a Wednesday, just past 2:30 a.m. I was the only one on the West Wing, doing routine vitals. Most of the patients were asleep. The hallway lights were dimmed. Nothing unusual, until I heard someone whistling a slow, broken tune coming from outside. At first, I thought it was someone on the sidewalk, maybe a drunk or a kid messing around. But the hospital has a security fence, and that side faces nothing but dry, open desert. Still, the whistling got louder, closer. It moved along the windows, room by room. I peeked through the blinds in room 206. There was something standing just beyond the glow of the security. Lights tall, lean, draped in what looked like animal skins. Its head twitched with each step, like it couldn't quite stay still. And even though I couldn't see its eyes, I knew it was looking straight at me. Then it stopped moving. The whistling went silent, and something scratched lightly on the glass. Not like nails, like bone. I backed away and locked the window. That's when I heard the overhead intercom buzz. Just once. Like someone had picked up a receiver somewhere in the hospital. Then a voice came through, but not a normal voice. It sounded broken, like someone trying to speak underwater, layered with 2 or 3 other voices. It whispered, "Claire, come outside, I'm lost." I froze, because no one else knew I was on that side of the building, and I never told anyone my shift that night. I rushed back to the nurse's station and hit the security buzzer. Silence. I tried the phone. Dead tone. Then the lights started flickering. Room 208's call. Light blinked on. Then room 210. Then 212. One by one. In order. Like something was moving down the hallway toward me. I didn't wait to see what it was. I grabbed my keys and ran straight into the stairwell. That's when I heard it. Again. The whistling echoing through the vents, getting closer. And for a moment, it sounded like my mom, but my mother's been gone for 5 years. I made it to the ER and told the charge nurse everything. She didn't laugh. She didn't question me. She just said one thing. "You never follow the whistling." Then she handed me a small pouch of ashes and cedar, told me to keep it on me, and called security to sweep the building. They didn't find anything. Of course they didn't. But a few nights later, a patient went missing. Old man, diabetic, not mobile. Security footage showed his bed empty. Blankets peeled back, like someone helped him up. And just before the tape cuts out, there's a faint whistling. I quit a month later, moved to Flagstaff. But some nights, when I'm driving home and the wind cuts just right, I swear I hear it again. That slow, broken tune drifting across the dark, and I lock my doors tight, because I know better now. You never follow the whistling, not unless you want to be found by something that's not human anymore.